Hey everyone. So I just wanted to discuss a topic of people saying that they're non-binary but they don't identify as trans, and this is a little bit controversial. I know that some people aren't going to agree with me on this, and that's completely fine. But I'm non-binary myself, so it does affect me with this, and it does kind of grind my gears a little bit. So what I hear a lot of them saying is that I identify as non-binary, but not as trans, and they say this because they feel like they haven't experienced transphobia, so they feel like it'd be disrespectful to call themselves trans, but that's not what transgender means. What transgender means is that you're a person that whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with the sex that they were assigned to at birth. So, even if you're gender fluid and you sometimes identify as a woman and you're AFAB, then but you have other days where you don't, you're still trans, honey. So, either way, it it is what it is. It's a yes or no question on whether or not you're cis versus you're trans, while gender and sexuality, as well as sex, is a spectrum. Whether or not you're a cis or trans, it's rather binary. It's a yes or no question for that. And gender and sexuality and sex are very complicated. It's a little bit more complicated than what we grew up with. And it's okay if it takes you a little while to actually understand what your gender is and how you like to be perceived and how you perceive yourself, as well as to fully understand yourself. Nobody fully understands themselves, so let's kind of start there. And there's also no wrong way to be transgender. And of course, if you're not out yet, of course you're going to be dealing with a lot less transphobia than other people are, especially if they've been out for a while. And you can't expect that as soon as you get out the gate, as soon as you come out, that bam, you're going to pass and be completely fine and everything's going to be just swell and dandy. No. It's going to take time, and not everybody is going to be medically transitioning. Not everybody can afford to, not everybody really wants to, and not everybody can. Some people might have a medical illness that makes it so they can't medically transition, or maybe they live in a household where they really can't, because it wouldn't be safe to at this point, or at that point. So every trans person transitions in a different way, and it's completely fine no matter which way you kind of go at it. Not every trans person is going to be experiencing dysphoria or experiencing it in the same way. Or they might not realize that they have dysphoria until much later, where they actually have a word for it, where they hear somebody call them she or he or they, and they feel weird about it, but they don't really understand what it means, or it kind of like hits them suddenly, and you're like, oh, okay, that didn't make me feel good. That's dysphoria. But there's also euphoria as well, where you feel elated and happy over your gender and the way that you present, and how people have responded as well. So one of my friends, they actually feel euphoria when people actually like switch between they and she with her. Sometimes even within the same sentence. And it's very helpful for her to have that experience, and I'm glad that they deal with that and experience that. I personally don't experience bottom dysphoria, but other people do. Other people will get surgery or aim to get so, or they'll pack. It all depends on the person, and that doesn't make you more or less trans. And I feel like when you go with the idea that, oh, I'm non-binary but I'm not trans, it kind of sends the message that some people are less trans than others, or that some people are less valid than others. And I don't really like that view, especially because it often ends up comparing different trans people and can get into a very icky location where you're being like, oh, well, I'm not like that trans person over there that can't pass. No, that's gross. Don't do that to you, to yourself, or to others. It's not fair. and not everybody has the same support, not everybody has the same resources. People are just trying to make do with where they can and what they have available to them. And I actually read this one book recently. I was reading it for work. It's the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership workbook. And obviously that's relating to leadership, but there's a little section in there about the law of process. And it talks about how it is the capacity to develop and improve their skills that distinguishes leaders from their followers. And it more ultimately talks about how you can start off being at one location, and as you kind of grow, and you don't get to where you want to be overnight. It's going to take a process, and you don't always see all of the steps that people make in order to get to the place where they want to be. But keep going at it, keep chipping at it, and take baby steps where you can in order to get to where you want to be. I'm not even completely where I want to be. I've only been transitioning for maybe less than a year, and I've only been on hormones for a month or so. So I haven't fully seen all of the changes that I want to. I've only just started recently having my coworkers actually use the right pronouns periodically sometimes. Some of them haven't even been using the right name yet. But it's a baby step. It's process. And at least a lot of them are doing better than my own mom has. And a lot of times it's about respect. And you need to be able to stand up for yourself where you can. You also need to be kind to yourself. A lot of trans people end up getting frustrated because they're not in the same location that somebody else that has been transitioning for much longer is at. So you can't compare yourself for your chapter 1 to where somebody else is at chapter 21. And some people are going to regress. Some people are going to start transitioning and then realize, oh, this doesn't really work for me. And then they'll move to something else and kind of change things up. And especially with being non-binary, I feel like it's a little bit more complicated because you may be okay with going by a binary pronoun. That's completely fine. That's valid. There are people that have transitioned as trans women but now identify as non-binary but still present as femme. That's completely valid too. There's so many different ways to be trans. There's no one way to be trans. There's no one way to be non-binary. There are people that are AFAB and identify as non-binary and are feminine. You don't owe androgyny to anybody. You don't owe an explanation to your gender and to how you want to be treated to anybody. They ought to respect that. And if they don't, then maybe you just need to be around different people. But I hope we keep growing. I hope we keep learning, and I hope we have a great day. Bye.